Hello there, and welcome back to the LML show. Today we'll shift topics a little bit again, and we will talk about books. Specifically, we will talk about this book, Ender's Game. Ender's Game is a book written in 1985 by author Orson Scott Card, and it's a book which has spawned a lot of other books and tales set in the world of Ender. It also spawned a movie that you might remember called Ender's Game as well, that was made in 2013 with Asa Butterfield and Harrison Ford. That was a movie which was a decent failure at the box office and which kind of struggled to even make the money it used for production. But it was the movie that introduced me to the world of Ender, and me being one of the 5 people that enjoyed the movie, including the screenwriter's wife, I always wanted to read the book, which I never managed to get my hands on, until the moment that I found it in Ireland in a charity shop for the cheap price of €1, and I said, why shouldn't I? And so here we are. And today I want to talk to you about this book. I'm gonna now talk about it with no spoilers, so don't worry about that. We'll talk about the plot, we'll talk about what's good about it and what's not so good about it, at least obviously to my own personal opinion. And then the second part of the video is gonna be without spoilers, and it will be a deeper analysis of the things I'm just about to say. So let's go. So, what's the plot of the book? Well, for those of you who have seen the movie, you already know, because the movie is actually a pretty good adaptation of the book, even though it's a lot less complex, which is to be expected from a movie. For those of you who don't know, we are in space. Earth has been attacked by insect-like aliens called Formics, not once, but twice. 'Cause we're fun. Those aliens have been pushed back both times, but a third attack is expected, which will probably wipe out humanity from Earth. To prevent that, what we might call as kind of a space fleet turns its eyes to children, to see if any of them have the potential to become the future military leader to lead mankind against these aliens. And since the very young age of 6 years old, they put monitors in their brains so they can see if they have the attitude for it, and the best of them are chosen to go to the Academy for Military Officers. Ender Wigging is one of these children. He's a 6-year-old who was sent to the academy because he has such an extreme potential that he might be the future that mankind needs. And this is Ender's story. The story of a child that faces internal turmoil because of the pressure that's put upon him. The story of external forces which try to manipulate him. And the story of hidden truths that only Ender will be able to reveal. And this is it. There's also other stuff, but that's what you need to know about the plot. Now, what's good about this book? Why would you like to read this book? The strength of this book lays in Ender. The story itself is pretty nice, and there's some nice world building going on here and there about the state of the world, its politics and such, but it all really pales in comparison to Ender's journey emotionally and what we go through in the book together with him. Ender, a child that due to family relationships, which I'm not gonna spoil now, wants to change. He wants to get rid of some of his attitudes. He wants to be better. He wants to improve. The genius with which this child deals with challenges that are put upon him by much bigger foes and forces is fascinating and entertaining. And you're really drugged inside the psyche of this child and what is being put throughout and what he's struggling with. What is it instead that you might not like as much about the book? At a certain point in the book, there's a second storyline that starts, which runs parallel to Ender's, but it really doesn't hold up to what the main story is about, and it kind of just feels like it's interrupting the flow of Ender's story, and I didn't particularly enjoy that while reading the book myself, because it just felt like I was being taken away from what really interested me, and it kind of broke the flow a little bit, so that wasn't particularly enjoyable. Also, the children in this book act totally realistically, so you will need a little suspension of disbelief reading through because they don't act like children, very simply. The dialogue sometimes is slightly cringy, but those are the only bits when the children are actually talking like children, so I guess it's fine for character reasons. So even after that, is the book worth it? And the answer is yes. Thoroughly, it is absolutely worth it. Even though there are these things which I didn't like, but maybe you won't even care about, the emotional journey that you go through with Ender cannot be obscured. So much so that I finished the book in 2 days, because I brought it in the car, I brought it going out, I brought it everywhere, because I couldn't take my eyes off it. The things that Ender goes through emotionally in the book are so captivating that it's very much in many points of the book I felt very emotionally connected to him and cheering for him and supporting him and wishing that he would do well because I felt very connected to the things he was feeling. And that is a journey that I can only advise you to go on. So that's what it's all about. This was the part without spoilers. These are the reasons you might like, might not like Ender's Game. I do recommend you to get it because I really liked it and I think you will have a lot of fun with it if that's the kind of stuff you could get into. Or even if you like the movie a little bit, you want to try the book, I'd say go for it because it's really good. That being said, now we'll talk about the book in more detail and with spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, that's your moment to leave. If not, continue with us and let's go. Ender is the book. His character was marvelously written and thought out, and he's also at the center of a series of challenges which are extremely captivating and interesting. His rise to the top of the command chain, which, let's remember, he does very much against his will throughout most of the book, is extremely thrilling. He leaves his family to run away from his brother and to run away from his parents who just cannot get on the same level of their children. And I mean, if I were them, I would ask a few questions. Ender as the genius of those characters will manage to fool everyone and everything, beating the system, which he does many times in the book, putting Graf and the fleet leaders in crisis. I saw myself very much connected to Ender, being one of those kids that in school didn't have a lot of friends that wasn't particularly active in class, but that just woke up when it was time to argue with the teachers. Ender's internal conflict, his fear of being like his brother, is extremely engaging. His fear to hurt other people is sadly comprehensible if you think about the fact that at the young age of 10 he's already killed 2 people and committed a genocide. But in fairness, who doesn't? A murder here, a massacre there, invading Poland. You know, the things you do when you're young. The child is pushed to the limit by Graf's merciless program to the point that he finds himself with no will or reasons to go on. My god, if I get you, Ender. He's so abused that he just runs out of energy, and one cannot help but empathize with the life of this poor child which is so stressed and abused. It's this bunch of tensions caused by stress and fear which make Ender so dramatically alone. Even at the end, when he finally manages to have this moment and have some friends and fight the final battle with them, they eventually go back to their homes and he's left alone. It's a beautiful story, but it's a sad story. It's the story of a child who deserved better. The world in which Ender lives in is absolutely not the focus of this book. It's a world which stays to the side of things, aside from the main premise of the space fleet and the Formix. For the most part, it's briefly explored in those chapters with Peter and Valentine when they plot their conquest of the world. However, there's an element of this world which is strongly emphasized: the thirds. In the United States, and as far as you can tell in most of the world, you cannot have a third child unless you want to loan him like you're playing Monopoly. The political structure of this world is very much like a Cold War political structure with the United States facing a reformed Warsaw Pact. There are a few details scattered here and there. We slowly learn a few things like that, for example, that in some countries they don't apply the third child rule, or how religions are changed and perceived in the world. There is very little that is shown, and even though there is very little, there's a lot going on, and it's all very interesting, to the point that when I was reading Valentine and Peter's chapters, the thing I was looking for were, hints at what was going on in the world, because it just felt very interesting and very creative. I haven't read the other books of the saga, so I don't know if those topics are explored deeper in those other tales and books, because in this book they're not. They're just briefly mentioned and not really explored, which is a pity because the world that Card created is full of potential which is not explored in this book. Actually, very often it just feels detached from Ender's story, which never deals with the social and political realities of the world it's set in. But as I said at the start of the video, there's a catch. These parts of the book which greatly enhance the world building unfortunately really distract from the main storyline. Even at the end, when Peter and Valentine's plot meets Ender's plot, the two never really feel like they could even compare, and so it doesn't feel satisfying in any way. It doesn't feel like this story has much of an impact on Ender, and it just distracts from it. I think there's a few reasons for that. The first one is that this subplot is introduced a little bit abnormally if that's a good term for it. What I mean is that the first 8 chapters of this book are all following Ender's story through Ender's eyes. The first chapter that introduces this new plotline is the 9th chapter, and in a book with only 15 chapters, that means that we're very much into the story already. I think we're page 120 on 300 pages, more or less. All in all, there are 3 or 4 chapters about this subplot, which is too little to make you feel like this is an essential part of the story, and Ender's story is so central to what we're reading that these chapters just feel from another book. They don't even feel like they should be there. This certainly doesn't take the positives out of these chapters, but for me, it's a fact. The other issue, which kind of complements the first one, is that this plot is never explored enough to get you into it. It pops in weird moments and it's never really explored. Most of the stuff that happens in these chapters, in the storyline, happens behind curtains and we don't get to read about, we don't get to see it while we're reading. Which is weird because it kind of creates this weird paradox in which I cannot wait to read Peter and Valentine's just to find those hints about the world building, which is really cool, as I said previously, but at the same time, I couldn't care less about Peter's and Valentine's plans. The two of them are so much more interesting when you put them in relation to Ender rather than their own little plan about taking over the world. It's so much intriguing to see how Valentine affects Ender and the relationship between the two, and the same goes for Peter. Ender's Game has the merit of having a series of secondary characters which enrich Ender's journey towards mass homicide. And they deserve to be mentioned even though none of them ever shine to the level that Ender does. Graf, for example, is a difficult colonel to understand. In many points of the book he works Ender to almost death, he stresses him, he makes life hell, but at the same time it's shown very clearly that he does care for Ender in his own way and that the only reason he's stressing him so much is that he sees in him the only way to save humanity. This emotional basis and tension between the two characters creates the foundation for really nice interaction between the two. It's not a surprise that Graf is the character that Ender talks to the most throughout the book. The other characters are not part of the story as much, but they're all written well enough to be enjoyable to read. After all, this is Ender's journey. But characters like Bonzo as an antagonist or Alai as a friend give you a sense of life in the academy which wouldn't be there if it was just Ender. So I think they're worth a little mention.
A little short for a stormtrooper.
Huh? Oh, the uniform.
The last thing I would like to mention is the way these children between 6 and 10 years old act. They all behave like seasoned Vietnam veterans. Throughout the whole book, except a very few moments, they act extremely mature, way too mature throughout every interaction they have. Do you want some ice cream, darling?
I have seen death. I have seen fire. I've seen countless bodies splattered against the water. What is the meaning of life, Mother? We need to talk again.
Now, I understand Ender is a genius, and so he's super mature. Fine. I can get behind the fact that Valentine and Peter are the same family, so fine. But there's a whole academy with 500 kids in them that all act like they're 25. Now, when I was 10, I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. I didn't fight Waterloo. I might have been a dumb child, for the love of God, everything is possible. But I find this kind of stuff a little bit unrealistic. It's all very interesting when you think about the fact that the preface of this book is literally the author, Orson Scott Card, telling that he's mad about people who don't believe that children could act this way and that his children act totally reasonably in the book. And to this, I can only say one thing. Fight me, Orson. 1v1. Nuketown. Just you and me. Nah, I'm kidding. It's probably my problem because it's a critique that I make in most content where kids are because I always find them way too mature. So it's probably just my problem. And this is it, ladies and gentlemen. This was Ender's Game, and the things that I thought were worth mentioning about Ender's Game. It is a book which gifted me with many great emotions and which made me feel really in symphony with Ender. But what about you? Did you like the book? Did you find it interesting? Did you agree with me? You can tell me all your thoughts in the comments or on Instagram if you so wish. And if you feel particularly nice and like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you very much. I will not be offended. That is all. Thank you very much for watching till the end if you have done so. A big kiss. Mwah. And I'll see you next time with another video.